I had a purpose before everybody had an opinion.
The 0-2 pitch, swing and a miss, struck him out.
You want Philly?
Chase Utley, you are the man.
You come out backyard and you try to start something, you always get your butt kicked.
The prayers have been answered.
How about those Eagles, baby?
And Rio Muto can run for days.
Can you feel what's about to happen on this field, man?
A perfect game. Roy Halladay has thrown the second perfect game in Philadelphia Phillies history.
All right, we are back with another episode of Philly Talk. A lot has happened. I got a lot of, not necessarily receipts this week, but I got like a lot of stuff to discuss. So I don't know how closely I'm gonna follow the formula of, the good, the bad, looking forward, just because there's a lot of craziness to discuss with what happened obviously this week's Eagles game. But first off, starting off with the rest of the NFL. I'm trying to remember any key injuries. Can't remember. The Packers, the Packers beat the Lions on Thanksgiving. The Cowboys blew out the Commanders to no one's surprise. The Niners looking to take control of that NFC West by beating the Seahawks. The Dolphins blew out the Jets. The Falcons pulled off a win against the Saints, and everyone's really just wondering who the heck is going to win the NFC South. And a lot of people are kind of disappointed that, an NFC South team is going to host a home game when they're likely going to have a terrible record, The Steelers beat the Bengals in a surprisingly close one. I don't think they lead the division. I think Baltimore is leading the division as it currently stands. They're 9-3. I think where are the Steelers at? Let me check. 7-4. Okay, so they're ahead though now of Cincy because of that win. The one I was confused about was the Browns. Now the Browns did lose to the Broncos this week, so they're 7-4. So them and the Steelers have the same record. It'll be interesting to see what happens there. But right now, of course, the Ravens are leading that division. Jaguars beat the Texans in a close one. Colts beat the Bucks in a close one. Jonathan Taylor is having some type of surgery. I forgot what it was for. He's going to be out like 2 to 3 weeks, so that might kill the playoff push for the Colts. Who knows? The Giants won 10-7 against the Patriots, which was pretty funny, sort of like a battle of mid right there. And speaking of battle of mid, we had the Bears and Vikings on Monday night, 12-10. I don't think either team scored a touchdown except for the Vikings, So only one touchdown. The rest was just purely field goals. Man, what a boring game that was until like obviously the last drive and all that. But other games I'm trying to see, the Ravens beat the Chargers. The Chiefs beat the Raiders, which for whatever reason, they decided that us people on the West Coast want to watch that game and not the Eagles versus Bills. Absolutely baffling move. Who the heck wants to see the Raiders get blown out, We're trying to watch what turned out to be a really great game, But so yeah, getting right into it, the Eagles pull off the win in overtime. They win 37-34. Now, this was a pretty crazy game, man. Especially because pretty much for like the first 3 quarters, this team was not playing well. Josh Allen was outperforming Jalen Hurts. The whole Bills team as a whole was outperforming the Eagles. They were obviously doing way more stuff than what we were doing on our side of the ball. It just wasn't looking great at all. Like you look at the quarter by quarter breakdown. So we scored first 7-0, and that obviously came on a brotherly shove. But then next thing you know, in the second quarter, the Bills put up 17 while we put up 0. They score another 7 in the third. We only score 7. What is that? Sorry, my math is bad. That's 24-14 heading into the fourth quarter. They score 7, and then we come out and score 17, to tie it up and send it to overtime. Was not looking good those first couple quarters. Like I said, maybe it was the weather, but at the same time, it was home, so like they're used to playing in Philly. They're used to the Philly weather, So I don't really have an explanation for those first 3 quarters where they were just playing pretty terrible, and I don't know what it really was, but the thing about this team is they go down fighting. They're not gonna just give up and quit. So they fought back. They had what's it called? They got Josh Allen to make a terrible play when he threw that interception. And that was another thing I saw with Hurts. There was it seems to happen a lot. Which it can be said for almost every quarterback at this point that they'll throw it right into the hands of their receiver, and then boom, it'll pop out, it'll deflect and get into the hands of the defenders. So people are always like, oh, those shouldn't count as interceptions towards the quarterback, but it is what it is. He had that pick, but he came back to finish the game strong. Now he only had 200 yards passing, but he finished with 3 touchdowns, and on the day, probably his best rushing game in a while. He had 65 yards rushing, 2 touchdowns, one of which as we'll get to discussing. Also on the ground, DeAndre Swift, 80 yards. Just come on. I know there's the whole concern in a way, of his past injury, his injury history, but this is a guy we got to start feeding the ball to more. He just does really well. He had that one really great run. I think it was was it the 4th quarter or was it overtime? I forget. He had that really great run. Another stat, as I was saying, you're gonna hear me bring up different things that people were noting down from the game. So the Eagles were down 24-14 at the end of the 3rd quarter. They had 76 passing yards through those 3 quarters. They gave up 505 yards on defense, and yet they still found a way to win. Just absolutely impressive game from the team, and especially to be able to fight back into this. Reed Blankenship, people were calling him an Iron Man, because I don't know if any of you all saw, but they're saying he played a total combined snaps of 116, which because it went into overtime, it makes sense, but that is absolutely insane usage. Just absolutely crazy. That he played that much. You look at the stats on what is Pro Football Reference. Sorry, I was blanking. I'm so used to saying Basketball Reference, but Football Reference. He had 95 snaps on defense, 21 on special teams. Absolutely insane usage. Darius Slay also had 95 on defense. James Bradbury, Kevin Byard. Just pretty crazy stuff from those guys to play that much, and you look at it, it was funny. A lot of people were kind of disappointed with the way James Bradbury has been playing, especially lately. He comes up with that interception and, locks down a couple guys afterwards, really steps up. The lone sack of the day goes to Brandon Graham, who got the record for most games as an Eagle, or not most, or I forget what the stat was. I think it is. He's played the most games for the Eagles, if I remember correctly. So, pretty great stuff to see there from, good old Brandon Graham. Hoping to get him one more, before he retires. Hopefully, all you can do is really hold out hope and faith, And then, yeah, like I was saying, they go into that 4th quarter, they just start getting back into this, You saw some really great plays from Jalen Hurts, especially. As you mentioned, he had the 3 touchdowns on the day. Those went to 3 different receivers, Devontae Smith, 106 yards on the day with a touchdown, 37 yards for AJ, which, isn't great, but he gets his touchdown. And then Zacchaeus got that touchdown, which was the craziest play from Jalen Hurts, where, he got out of the pocket. And I like the way someone broke it down, they were he gets out the pocket, he gets on the move. When he sees the pressure coming, he sees the defender's back, so he knows they're not paying attention. Yeah, I think they said they saw the defender wasn't looking at him, so he knew he had space, he had time, so he sets himself and he gets that ball in for Zacchaeus. Absolutely insane, The biggest talking point, obviously, of the game was the referees. I saw a lot of people talking about the refs, and I get it. Referee play, especially factoring into a game, is just super annoying. But as always, me, I'm not one to cry ref, you know, and you can go back through all the different videos, you know, even when it's come to our detriment. I've always sort of been the guy who lives by the mindset of like, you shouldn't be in that position anyways. And like, it's the same thing for baseball, you know, like I will always, you know, criticize the refs, especially because I'm a guy that acknowledges it goes both ways, you know. It's not just one way. You can look at it so many times, like especially, you know, the NLCS. When I was complaining about the umps, it was both ways, you know, because both times, you know, the Diamondbacks and the Phillies, it was like they didn't know what to swing at and what not to swing at, because anything and everything was tossed up in the air, whether it was going to be a ball or a strike, you know. The check swings half the time looked like they weren't even like passing the plate, and yet they were getting called, you know, on both sides. So I can understand the frustration from Bills fans, you know, I get it. But to me, I'm just always going to be the guy that, like, if my team, you know, is like screwed over in a sense by the refs, I always fully believe in the mindset of just being like, we shouldn't have been in that position anyways, you know. So like, it's not me trying to dog on the Bills, but like, you were up by a hefty amount, you know. The refs shouldn't play a factor into a game that you allowed the Eagles to come back into first, you know. And like, I've said the same thing for Eagles, various Eagles games too. Like I remember, I think it was last year's game, was it against the Commanders or was it the Cowboys? I forget, but there was like a lot of questionable plays from both refs, on both sides of the ball from the refs, and I took it, you know. I said, you know, that's on the team for making those mistakes, you know, especially a lot of the guys that were making those like false starts penalties, you know. And like in this game, we saw twice, you know, Jason Kelsey on that final drive get penalized, you know, for his mistakes. And, you know, it could have easily cost us the game. And if it did, you know, if it cost us the game, and let's say Jake Elliott wasn't able to make that kick, I wouldn't be getting mad at Jake Elliott. I would be getting mad at Kelsey for making those mistakes. You know, I'd be getting mad at my own players for the mistakes they make, such as the Super Bowl, you know, with James Bradbury. You know, I wasn't getting mad at the refs for some of their calls. I was getting on our players instead, being like, this is a key situation, you know, you got to make sure you do everything in your power to not mess it up even more, you know. So that's just my mindset to it. But I understand the Bills fans' frustration. I'm not, you know, trying to what's the word, like minimize their frustrations or, you know, just dismiss, you know, their anger. But that's just the way I look at it. I can totally understand, but, you know, again, I can complain as well too, such as, you know, that roughing the passer on Josh Allen. I mean, come on. You heard me rant about it in one of the earlier episodes from Philly Talk. I can't remember if it was the last episode or before, whatever. But I was talking about, you know, I just am really frustrated with a lot of these roughing the passer calls, just because it's like, man, these defenders can't even do much, you know. Like in one of the, I think it was in the Bears-Vikings game, there was like a play where Justin Fields throws the ball downfield to like his receiver who's like wide open, and he's swarmed by all these defenders and they're struggling to take him down. And it's like, these defenders, again, just kind of like how I was saying right now with baseball, with the whole you know, what is the ump gonna call a ball and a strike, these defenders are scared to do any type of, you know, tackle, because they don't know what the referee's gonna call, you know. They don't know if the ref's gonna call them for unnecessary roughness, for, you know, targeting, horse collar, you know, all this stuff that they could be called for. It's like they're afraid to even touch these guys on offense anymore, you know. Like, they can't do anything without getting called for it. And just like in that Josh Allen play, the guy's called for roughing the passer just because he extended his arm, I think it was. But it was like, dude, he was rushing to try and get the guy. Obviously the ball left, but like, what are you expecting these 300-pound, these 250 plus 300-pound, you know, defensive linemen, linebackers, what are you expecting them to do? To just stop on a dime like nothing, you know? Look at that play with Jordan Davis, by the way. I gotta shout out that. Him chasing down Josh Allen, you know, and keeping up with him until like he slipped, you know? It's like, with the speed he was running at to keep up with Josh Allen, it's like, what would you have expected him to do? Like, let's say if he hit Josh Allen, you know, just because he was trying to chase him down, he accidentally hits him while going out of bounds with him. You think that man can easily stop on a dime without getting himself injured, you know? I just feel bad for a lot of these defenders, you know, especially as someone who, really loves defense especially, and loves a lot of, just growing up, loved a lot of the different defensive players we got to watch, in the 2000s and 2010s, It's like we got some great defenders now, but it's like a lot of them can barely do anything because, boom, here come the rest with the flags, So it's just like, I feel bad for a lot of those defenders. But getting to the main point, obviously, Jake Elliott, huge field goal, great stuff from him to send that game to overtime, we obviously get to overtime. The Bills are only able to get a field goal. Shout out the defense for stepping it up once again. The Bills were driving on them, but they stepped up when we needed them the most. Obviously it's not a great game from the defense. As we mentioned, 505 yards on the day is not what you want to be giving up. But still, they held their own. And the Eagles just do what they do best. They fight. They start pushing through. They get down. And, man, I'm still not, a big supporter of Brian Johnson, but I understand with the way this team's playing. We're just going to have to rock and roll with this guy until the very end of the season, and if someone else wants to take him, sure. But I'm still not the most confident in his play calling. I don't want to sound like a hater, but it's just me as a fan watching. It's funny, we're 10-1, and I'm not happy, with a lot of the play, but it's just something we'll get into later after this. But, got to give him credit, especially in the sense of, like, he's always calling these quarterback draws, and it finally paid off this time where Hurts takes the balls. He noticed the ways the defenders are set up, and he knows he has that lane. He goes running. Jason Kelsey gets a huge block on that play. And again, the defenders not really wanting to do much to tackle. They kind of looked like they didn't know how to stop Jalen, especially because, again, it's a quarterback. Especially they know they can easily get flagged for it, and you especially don't want to, like, when you're trying to stop this team, you don't want to let them get to the goal line, which is just going to be an easy win. But no, all the people that are hating on the brotherly shove, well, here you go. We don't need the brotherly shove. We can just run the ball straight in and get ourselves a victory, walking out 10-1. Absolutely impressive stuff with the way we've been playing on this stretch, I'm just super happy with that win. It was absolutely crazy stuff, man. And, the Eagles are 10-1. Clinched the playoffs. First team to clinch the playoffs. Real great stuff. And I'm just excited, man. We got the Niners up next. You got Deebo Samuel hating on James Bradberry for no reason at all. James Bradberry doesn't even open his mouth, and this man's hating on him. He's been talking ever since the championship game. So we'll see, It's up to this team on whether they want to back up their own talk or not. It's up to the Eagles to back up, their talk in a sense. Like, do you want to let these guys talk, or you want to beat them? Like, do you want to talk back, or do you want to get that victory instead and let that win talk for itself? So it's up to this team, and I'll give the Niners the same advice I said about the Chiefs game. Or I don't think I got a chance to say it about the Chiefs game because of the bye week happening right before. But a lot of people were trying to make it out like, oh, this is the Eagles' revenge game. No, it isn't. Because there is no revenge for the Super Bowl unless you win the Super Bowl, Like, that's the revenge. If they match up in the Super Bowl again and they beat them, that's the revenge for last year. Not no week 9, or no, what was it? No, week 11 regular season game in November, that's not no revenge game. So it's the same thing here. That's the thing I advise the Niner fans is like, hey, if you win, it's not me trying to discredit you win. Yeah, you'll beat us, but like the true revenge comes in the playoffs, like that's when everything matters the most. It's the same thing I say with the Phillies. Once the postseason starts, it's clean records for everyone, and that's where your statements are made. But obviously, it could be a good, momentum game for the Niners. It could be a big staple win to be like, hey, we beat the Eagles, And it's the same thing for the Eagles. If you beat the Niners, you're able to boast the fact that what was supposed to be our toughest stretch in the schedule, we went 4-0 in. We beat the Cowboys, we beat the Chiefs, the Bills, and the Niners. Like that's something that they should be playing with in mind to be like, like to light a fire under them. Is like what was supposed to be our toughest stretch according to all the different media. We went out and proved them wrong, And that's another thing too, is like people are trying to discredit the Eagles, being like, oh, they're not that impressive in their wins. They're not blowing teams out. Last year we were blowing teams out, and people were like, oh, it's not impressive because you're playing against weak teams. This time we're grinding out wins, and people are like, oh, it's not impressive because you're not dominant. You're not winning in dominant fashion. Meanwhile, the Cowboys lead in point differential, and everyone's hyping them up. And yet, when you look at that graph of point differential, they've played about like 6 teams who are at the very bottom. Meanwhile, 4 out of the 6 teams that are ahead of us, the Chiefs, the Bills, the Cowboys, and I think the Dolphins, we've beaten them. I think that's more impressive, but that's just me. But looking forward to this San Francisco game. It's going to be a tough matchup, man. Hoping to have Lane Johnson back because he wasn't here for this Bills game. Hoping to have him back because, got to give credit where credit is due. That Niners defensive line is something difficult, The offense of the Niners is especially difficult when you got Christian McCaffrey and Brandon Ayuk and George Kittle and Deebo Samuel at times, Like, that's a difficult offense to go against, but obviously it's going to be a battle of the trenches, Eagles D-line versus Niners offensive line. Niners defensive line versus Eagles offensive line. The Eagles haven't been doing really well at getting pressure as of late, I think they only had 1 sack against Josh Allen. They only had 1 sack against Mahomes. I don't remember how many sacks they got on Dak, but you gotta do better, and this is a game where like that was a big reason why we won the NFC Championship game last year or earlier this year. It's because we got that pressure going early on. We were winning that battle in the trenches. So it has to be the same thing here. And the defense really has to hold up. I know it's kind of an obvious thing, but like they really need to hold up, and if there was ever a time for this offense to really, not necessarily experiment, but like get back to like last year of like just like right from the start, like just like none of this like what we saw in, like I don't think you can do the same thing that you did in this Bills game here with the Niners. I don't think you can make that same mistake of falling behind that much early. I think they have to keep going, point for point with the Niners, and it's gonna come down to like one possession that changes it. Where it's like a crucial stop, a crucial interception that allows us to get the lead. But overall, I think it's going to be a good matchup. I'm obviously very excited for it. And, I'm just super excited for the future of this team. It's very nerve-wracking at times. A lot of people like to be like, oh, I wish my team was 10-1 and I got to complain about it. It's not really complaining. It's the same thing as like the Phillies. Like you'll see them win a game, but that doesn't mean that the game wasn't nerve-wracking. The Eagles are 10-1, but that doesn't mean each of these games aren't nerve-wracking, Like, they can still be a really good team and cause their fan base to be stressed out, that was an argument all over social media, and I just found it kind of dumb that, like, people were trying to, essentially get into this competition of what team suffers the most or whatever. And then, of course, to just close this video, there's a lot of talks about, the MVP. I'm still in the boat, as much as I love Jalen Hurts, I'm still in the boat that maybe this should be the year that a position player wins it. But, of course, it's not, because there's like 10 other quarterbacks ahead of guys like Tyreek Hill, Christian McCaffrey. They got Brock Purdy ahead of Christian McCaffrey. No hate to Brock Purdy, man, but above Christian McCaffrey, you think Brock Purdy is more essential to the way that team's offense runs than Christian McCaffrey? Oh, brother, Tyreek Hill is carrying that Dolphins team with his crazy performances each week. And everyone's always like, oh, well, these guys can't perform if the quarterback doesn't get them the ball. A lot of these quarterback stats don't look as good if it wasn't for their position players, If it wasn't for these position players like Tyreek Hill, who take a 10, 20-yard pass and takes it, 50 more yards after the catch, that inflates the quarterback stats, So, I don't know, man. The MVP discussions are really kind of frustrating to me. I know the whole thing with Jalen Hurts is that, like, oh, he doesn't have as much passing stats and all that. But, I don't know. The MVP discussions, I mean, it's just always going to come down to a quarterback. There's nothing much we can do about it at this point. I've always proposed that they do something similar to the college system where they just award, give like a top award to each position. Like here's the top quarterback, top receiver, top running back, top tight end, top lineman, defensive lineman, linebacker, defensive back, stuff like that. Because at this point, it's just kind of embarrassing when, we're giving MVP votes to guys who don't even have any of the stats, and we're not even wanting to acknowledge the other great players on those teams, so that's just the way I feel. But overall, again, excited for the future of this Eagles team. And tying into the whole Jalen Hurts discussion thing, a lot of people are like, oh, he has all these rushing touchdowns and all that. And a lot of people complain. They're like, oh, they came on the brotherly shove and all that. Look, man, at this point in the season, if you're still hating on the brotherly shove, man, that's on you. And the only thing I can tell you is at the end of the day, it's 6 points no matter what when they use it on the goal line, At the end of the day, it's still 6 points, and no one has stopped it yet, So I wonder what's going to happen first, Someone's going to stop the Eagles from doing the brotherly shove, or people are going to stop complaining about the brotherly shove,